So let's talk about Deuteronomy, the final book of the Torah. At first glance, it really does look like Moses is just giving one long farewell speech, a final recap for the Israelites. But what if it's not a recap at all? What if it's actually a revolution? See, Deuteronomy is so much more than just a history lesson. It's a huge pivot point. It's the moment where the entire relationship between a people, their laws, and their destiny gets fundamentally reframed. Because this book argues that the future isn't going to be about history. It's going to be all about responsibility. Here's a great way to think about it. For 40 years, the Israelites have basically had divine training wheels on. Now, as they're about to enter the land, Moses isn't just reminding them of the rules of the road. Nope. He's taking the training wheels off. He's reinterpreting everything that happened to get a nation ready to stand on its own 2 feet to ride the bike by themselves. Okay, so how does he actually pull this off? Well, it all kicks off with a pretty radical idea that there isn't just one kind of Torah or divine teaching. There are actually two. On one side, you have what's called Torah Emet, the Torah of Truth. This is the big stuff, right? The objective, divine revelation from Mount Sinai. It's the written word, absolute. But then there's Haye Olam, which translates to eternal life. And this is the law as it's lived, as it's interpreted, as it's internalized by people. It's the part that's planted within us. Deuteronomy is the book that builds the bridge from the revelation to the responsibility. So that's the theory. But how does this shift from getting a revelation to taking responsibility actually play out? Well, Moses shows us. He takes one of the nation's biggest, most epic failures, and he completely reframes it for them. I'm sure you know this one. The story of the spies. The scouts go in to Canaan. They come back with this just terrifying report that crushes the whole nation's spirit. And traditionally, we blame the spies. A failure of leadership, right? But in his retelling, Moses points the finger somewhere totally different and asks, who was really to blame here? And you can see this shift so clearly when you put the two accounts side by side. In the original story from the Book of Numbers, God tells Moses to send the spies. So the blame for the failure, it lands on the spies and their negative report. But check out how Moses tells it in Deuteronomy. He says the mission only happened because the people demanded it. So now the blame shifts to the entire nation for giving in to fear. The lesson is no longer about a failure of leadership. It's about a failure of public responsibility. And Moses is crystal clear about this. He tells them, quote, "Then all of you came to me and said, 'Let us send men ahead.'" He's putting their own words right back in front of them, placing the responsibility exactly where it belongs, on them. For a nation about to govern itself, this is an absolutely critical lesson. So this is way more than just Moses being a stickler for the historical record. It's a profound moral education. He's teaching them that if you're going to be a free nation, you can't just hide behind your leader's mistakes. To govern yourselves, you have to own your collective choices, your fears, your future. Now, this whole new way of thinking about responsibility changes everything. It even changes the definition of what a holy life is. So what does holiness look like not in some supernatural desert, but in the messy day-to-day reality of running a country? Centuries later, the philosopher Maimonides just distilled this spirit perfectly. He argued that real holiness wasn't just for the priestly tribe of Levi. He said it was for any person whose spirit moves them to serve a higher purpose. I mean, this is such a democratic vision of holiness. It's not about your family line, it's about your personal choice. So who's the ultimate example of this kind of chosen holiness? You'd probably guess, a secluded prophet or maybe a high priest, but Maimonides points to someone who's way more involved with the world, a king, specifically King David. And when you think about it, it makes so much sense. He was a warrior, a politician, a judge, a musician. I mean, a man completely entangled in the messy, sometimes brutal reality of building a nation. So why him? Because David didn't run away from the world to be holy. He worked to sanctify the world he was in. He took full responsibility for his nation, politically and spiritually. And that right there is the ideal of Deuteronomy. Holiness isn't a retreat, it's responsible engagement. It's holiness in action. So when you put all these pieces together, you can really see the massive journey that Deuteronomy is charting out. It's this very deliberate path from a kind of passive dependence to an active responsibility. Back in the desert, everything was guided from above. They were led by a pillar of fire. They waited around for miracles. They just received the law. They were following orders. But entering the land, the whole game changes. Now they have to be guided by human interpretation and choice. It's not about waiting for miracles. It's about taking responsibility. It's no longer enough to just receive the law. They have to live it. And that means making hard moral choices in a very complex world. And at the end of the day, that's the revolutionary purpose of Deuteronomy. It is the bridge, carefully built, to carry a people from being a nation that's led by God to becoming a nation that must learn how to find God within itself. So the ultimate message here extends way beyond ancient history. The book is arguing that building a good moral society isn't just a job for prophets or kings. That responsibility falls on everyone. It posed a question thousands of years ago that feels just as urgent today. If creating a better world is on all of us, what is your part?